Hey, welcome back to Big T, and welcome to episode 2 of 32 of predicting every team's regular season record. Today we have the second worst team, record-wise, in the league last year, the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans, kind of like the Chicago Bears, have went through a lot, and I mean a lot of changes. And I'm not going to go as in-depth as I did in the Chicago Bears video. However, I do want to look at their team stats compared to, being the second worst team in the league. So, obviously, they'd have to have a pretty bad record. 3-13-1. That is very similar to the Chicago Bears record last year. The only difference is the tie that they had against the Colts. Passing yards, they had just under 200, which actually puts them 25th in the league. But rushing yards per game, 31. Dameon Pierce did not play as much as, the Texans probably hoped, considering, how, he's shown flashes, He looks like those early 90 running backs, man. And then defensively, 24 points per game, which is in the 27th in the league. Points for, so how much points they put up offensively, 17 flat, tied for 30th. So I think it's very interesting to consider this team struggled on both sides of the ball with no glaring strength. At least with the Chicago Bears, they had a strength in the rushing game. However, the Texans just no strength at all. Which is why I think it's very interesting to consider where this Texans team is picking up from last year. Just horrible all around. And obviously, new starter CJ Stroud's in town. Second overall pick in the draft. Based on the depth chart, it looks like he's instantly going to be starting. And he's going to figure out a lot this year. He's going to have a tough time. But that's okay. It's all part of the process. You just got to hope that the Texans stick with him. The same way the Jaguars stuck with Trevor Lawrence. Now, what help does C.J. Stroud have? So, Dameon Pierce, one of, the best rookie running back last year, I think, as far as I know. He showed a lot of flashes last year. He looks like a hard runner, always can get you yards, will plow through anybody. And it looks like he's going to be sharing snaps with Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary, one of the more underrated running backs, but, he hasn't made much production. He's kind of hindered a really good Bills team. However, I do think he deserves some playing time, maybe about 30% of the running back snaps. He's a decent blocker, even with his build. Wide receivers are not looking great. Wide receiver 1 is actually listed as Nico Collins, He's alright, he's been kind of a long-time Texans player, but I think that the Texans really should have tried to swing in a big wide receiver. And I know it's hard for them to do that because they're one of the worst teams in the league, so they don't really have, much of a leeway in free agency. Even though they brought in a couple of good players, they just couldn't really swing in a good receiver. However, they did draft Tank Dell, an Ohio State teammate of C.J. Stroud. He could pan out really nicely. And John Mechie, he hasn't had time to prove himself yet. Along with that, Dalton Schultz. This guy, very solid tight end. 577 yards last year, 5 touchdowns. He was huge in the playoff win. And, based on his usage, he could be very useful. He's only signed to a 1-year contract. I kind of hope he does return to the Cowboys after this. Because, he kind of fit that Cowboys offense, I feel like. But we'll really see how that turns out. Offensive line is looking pretty good, from where it was last year. By the time I'm recording this today, Scott Quesenberry, a lot of y'all might not know him, but he was the starting center for the Houston Texans. He was solid, out for the year, which means rookie Juice Scruggs is instantly put in that starting center role. So that's going to be interesting. Very developmental year for them. I do think that this team does get a little worse with this happening, but I think this will benefit them in the long run. Along with that, you've got Titus Howard, Shaq Mason, Laramie Tunsil, one of the best left tackles. Maybe, not the best, but he's damn near up there. And defensively, This team struggled last year defensively. What did they do to help the defense? Well, they brought in Will Anderson, third pick in the draft, traded up to get him. They brought in Jimmy Ward, and behind these guys are going to be a lot of youth. Derek Stingley Jr. and Jalen Petrie were great last season for the Texans. Two bright spots on this team. You also have Shaquille Griffin alongside him. Steven Nelson, Desmond King, they're okay. This defense has definitely made a lot of changes for the better. They did draft for that middle linebacker position Henry, Tuo. Interesting last name. But I think that this team defensively just needs time, It's kind of the same of what I said about the Chicago Bears. They need time to figure out what they are defensively. Because right now I just feel like it's a bunch of players just thrown in to an offense, put it in a blender, see how it turns out. But I do think you have a lot of long-time starters on this defense, especially the young guys, Will Anderson, Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley. We'll see if Jimmy Ward is a long-time player for the Texans. I think it just depends if they win. I think the Texans are capable of building a culture, and this team looks very significantly different than how it did last year. You also can't forget that they brought in D'Amico Ryans, former defensive coordinators of the best defense in the league, the San Francisco 49ers. And let's just take a look at their draft real quick. I didn't cover this in the Bears video, but we kind of talked about all of the top picks on the depth chart. C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, getting a lot of star players, Juice Scruggs, who now that pick looks even better because of the injury to Scott Quesenberry. Tank Dell, and then just some depth. Xavier Hutchinson could be someone who ends up panning out, maybe, but I don't know what his playing time is going to look like because he is actually just behind Tank Dell, so we'll see how that looks. But anyways, it's time to get to the good part, Let's take a look at the Houston Texans and see what we got for their record. Week 1, a very tough game against the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens, in the beginning of the season is just a different team, It's just a more complete team. I'm going to have the Ravens taking this one. I don't think that's a hot take by any means. I just think the Ravens will figure it out. They'll be they're going to come out of the gates hot, And hopefully this doesn't demoralize this Texans team, because they're going to get dominated on both sides of the ball. If the Texans somehow win this game, I will be fucking shocked. But everything on paper says that the Baltimore Ravens will win this game. I hope, it's a good experience for C.J. Stroud and the Texans offense to learn from. Week 2, we got a more favorable matchup. Colts at Texans. I'm going to give the Texans the home opening win for them. Now, I'm not high on the Colts at all. They're going to be coming up soon, But, they're kind of going through a similar situation that the Texans are. New quarterback. If it's Gardner Minshew or if it's Anthony Richardson, new faces. They're struggling with, retaining their good players. And I just think the Colts, too much drama. First-year head coach. Jim Irsay is an idiot. And I think this team is going to be a complete dumpster fire this year. And we will see them very soon because they were trash last year. Week 3, Texans facing the Jags. Another divisional matchup. I think the Jags are just too good to lose this game. I don't think the Jags are going to be that team that goes 13-4, wins the division, makes the AFC championship. The Lions and the Jaguars are two teams that a lot of people think are going to go far next year, which I wouldn't justify. I think the Texans are going to give the Jaguars a run for their money. I do think this is a game where C.J. Stroud's going to develop a lot. He's going to gain a little bit of confidence. He's going to make some good passes. However, I don't think he's going to do enough. And I think this Texans defense will not be able to put any pressure on Trevor Lawrence and he's going to have an amazing game. Week 4, Steelers facing the Texans. Man, I really want to pick the Texans in this one. However, I just think the Steelers, their D-line is one of the best D-lines in the league, and I feel like they're just going to tear apart that Texans O-line, with a couple new faces there. CJ Stroud's going to make some mistakes, as the first-year quarterback. The Steelers on paper are a better team, and I will have them taking. Week 5, Texans playing the Falcons. Falcons are going to be at home, and a lot of toss-ups in my opinion coming up. I'm going to give this one to the Falcons. Now, let me say the Texans will be ran all over by this Falcons rushing attack. The Falcons can contend to be the best running offense next year. And I think that the Falcons also have a good secondary and some good weapons. I'm kind of high on the Falcons next year, I won't lie to you, which a lot of people don't see. However, I think that the Texans will still put up a great fight. Besides for week 1, I don't think they're going to get blown out in any of these games coming up here until, maybe the Bengals. But I do think the Texans will put up a good fight. Week 6, I'm going to have the Texans bounce back against the Saints. Another video where I'm going to be a little critical against the Saints. A little unfair, you could say. But the Saints team just, doesn't have a lot going for it. I kind of explained it in the Bears video. But about the Texans, I feel like they're going to figure out how to, get their offense going. They're going to be rolling. They're going to, kind of feast off this very damaged Saints defense. That's going to lead them into the bye at 2-4. And that's not necessarily bad. They're going to be coming out of this bye, still, I guess, in playoff contention. But they're going to need to turn it around significantly. Week 8, both the Texans and the Panthers coming off of a bye. This feels like it was done on purpose, Number 1 versus number 2. The last time we seen this was Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, which is very recent. And I think I'm going to give this one to the Texans. I am very low on the Panthers next year. They're going to be in for a humbling experience. And they're probably going to get tossed around by their division a little bit, But I think that's okay. The Texans are going to feast off that kind of okay Panthers defense, The Panthers defense has some stars, but I just feel like it's not enough to kind of establish it as a great defense. And they lost a lot of good players, Donta Foreman and DJ Moore are both gone. New quarterback, a lot of new for the Panthers, and I don't think they're ready to do anything this season, significant. It's going to be a year that they should take to themselves to kind of, develop and figure things out. Week 9, we have the Buccaneers coming off a mini bye, facing the Texans. However, I will be giving the Texans this win. Now, I know in the last video I said I think the Buccaneers are going to be better than they were last year. But I just feel like it's one of those games that the Buccaneers just look like the team that the people thought they would look like, I just think they won't get anything going in the passing game. Like, D'Amico Ryans will perfectly scheme out a good plan to beat this Buccaneers team, which is probably going to be very pass-heavy. Week 10, we have the Texans visiting the Bengals. Like I say, with a lot of bad teams facing good teams, I'm not going to overthink this. I'm going to pick the Bengals. There's a lot of reasons for me to think that the Bengals will win this game. Texans defense, this is going to be their biggest challenge yet, in my opinion, because of just how destructive that pass game will be. Along with a solid running game, it's not going to be pretty at all. And I think they just continue to slump here. Week 11, I will be giving it to the Cardinals. Another win for the Cardinals against, one of the bottom teams from last year. And I think that the Texans, This Cardinals team is going to have a huge shift, I think, in the second half of the season when Kyler Murray comes back. And I think that, they're not, they just I feel like the Cardinals are going to have a huge shift coming into the second half of the season with Kyler Murray. Maybe a little bit of momentum. I think they're going to snag a couple of wins. I did have them win against the Bears, and I'm going to have them win against the Texans. Week 13, Jags facing the Texans. I'm going to give a fluke win to the Texans. Now, I think that this win isn't going to define much for the Texans. I think it's going to kind of show us that the Jaguars are kind of a vulnerable team. In this rematch, I feel like D'Amico Ryans will once again create a defensive scheme to stop the Jaguars, which, might not happen a lot. This Jaguars offense will be booming, but I just think you'll figure out, a way to stop their pass-heavy attack and kind of force them to use ETN and then kind of force, a lot of stops. Week 13, Broncos at Texans. Although I do hate the Broncos coming into this season, I will have them winning this game. It's just, in the beginning of the offseason, I'm not even going to get to that. I'm not even going to deep dive into the Broncos. You almost got me started. But I do think that this is one of those games that they will win against the Texans just because of how good their defense is, And new head coach Sean Payton, they're going to be better than they were last year. They should be able to beat these, as we're talking, I don't know if you'd consider the Texans a bad team at 5-7, 5-6 coming into this game. But I don't think it's going to look good for them at all. Week 14, Texans facing the Jets. I can't see the Jets losing this game. The Jets just too defensively powered. And, an offense that's kind of foolproof, Good passing game, good running game on paper. The Jets are going to be kind of a force to be reckoned with. However, I do think they're going to drop a lot more games than people might expect because of just how new, faces are. New quarterback, some new wide receivers with Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, maybe Dalvin Cook. I do think it's going to take some time for the Jets to morph into the team that, that they expect it to be. But I do think this Jets team, either late this year or next year, will be a force to be reckoned with and a contender to, win the AFC East. Week 15, Texans playing the Titans at home. I'm going to give this one to the Titans. I positively think that Derrick Henry will be in this game. I think that Ryan Tannehill will be the starter, the whole year. I know a lot of people are saying, I've been hearing a lot of people in camp saying, Will Levis, he's looking good. Nah, man, I don't see it. I think Ryan Tannehill, he's got a good year left in him, and I feel like the Titans are going to be exceeding expectations, They're going to be able to beat a lot of bad teams on their record, and I think this will be one of them. Week 16, Browns at Texans. I will be giving this win to the Texans, I know that after that Titans loss, that'll probably knock them out of playoff contention. Maybe they'll still have a chance, like this much of a chance. But in the stacked AFC, I doubt it. But with that, I'm still going to give them the win. This Browns team is probably going to be the most inconsistent team in the league. They have the potential to beat some of the top teams in the league. However, they have potential to lose to some of the worst teams in the league. And I think this will be one of those times where the Texans, they just snap, they click offensively, defensively to kind of morph what they might look like next season. Because right now, I think the Texans are ahead of schedule in their, 20-year rebuild. No, but I do think they're ahead of schedule compared to teams like the Panthers and the Bears. I think they're kind of, can get momentum going into next season. Although coming off a win, I'm going to give the Titans the sweep. I just think the Titans are too good of a team to lose to the Texans. I think this is going to be an important game for the Titans coming into this game. And I just think it's a game that they're not going to choke. Finally, Week 18, Texans at Colts. I said I was low on the Colts, and I'm going to give the Texans this late win, bringing them to 7-10. Same record as the Chicago Bears. Both these teams have improved a lot. 3-3 against the division. Of course, that comes with the sweep of the Colts and a split with the Jags. 4-8 against a very stacked AFC conference. 5-4 at home, not bad, but 2-6 at away. I do think that the Texans do have a nice stadium, and they do have, very diehard fans, but very minimal fans. However, I do think that this will add up. And I'm only going to point this out for this video and the Bears video, but these numbers right here don't matter until we fill out all the teams, because this isn't based off last season, the winning record, losing record, playoff teams. I just want to clarify that one more time. And yeah, I think this will bring the Texans to 7-10, probably be third in their division, and a lot of improvement coming off a 3-13 and 1 year. They're going to double their win total, and they're going to, after this season, be fully focused into next season. They're going to have money to spend. Hopefully they can bring in some good names. If they can pick up a couple wins, maybe they'll have some free agency leeway. But that's what I think the Texans will end the year as. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe. If you not enjoyed this video, dislike. Let me know. Comment. What do you think of me giving the Texans a 7-10 record? But for real, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. And y'all take it easy. Good night.